Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Lost Everything in Childhood and Had Quirk Odin's Ravens of Death Movie 1. Before we start, please go support C0 Revuz N0 Tiz for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. Izuku was a boy who lost everything: his mother, his dream, his past and his future. He ended up being reduced to a mere laboratory rat. But not even the cruelest experiments could break his will. Now older, he cries out for a single objective, not revenge but freedom. The child. 60 years ago, in the city of Qinshin, China, a child was born with the ability to shine, and after him, thousands and millions of people began to manifest similar gifts. Little by little, these paranormal gifts became the norm in the world, and now more than 60% of the global population has a special ability. But in this world of chaos and disorder, there were people who wanted to use their gifts for evil, villains. And among them all, there was none more vile and terrible than the one known as All for One, a man whose sole goal was to have control over all people. He created a criminal empire and cruelly killed anyone who opposed him. But he did not accomplish all this alone. He had powerful subordinates who served him faithfully, and among them was a man known as Dr. Garaki. In everyone's eyes, he was nothing more than a kind doctor, renowned for his advances in gift research. But in reality, he was nothing more than a mad scientist who used people like guinea pigs for his insane experiments. It was thanks to him that our story had a beginning. Unknowingly, it would give way to the story of a little boy. Innocent and brave was what described him. However, after the awakening of his gift, his life became a hell, and thanks to that, in the future he would become a symbol. Not peace, nor hope, nor justice or anything like that, but something much deeper. A symbol of change, of revolution. And his story began the very day he had to go to Dr. Garaki when he was only 4 years old. "You have a really interesting gift, kid," said Dr. Garaki. In front of him were two people, both green-haired, a woman of about 27 years old, and a boy of barely 4. "It's the first time I've seen one like that." "Oh, so I have a hero's gift?" "Well, I wouldn't put it that way, but I'm sure you'll achieve great things with this gift," he concluded. "Do you know what to name it yet?" Well, the boy hesitated for a second, but quickly continued speaking. "I did some research, so I decided to call it Odin's Ravens." I see. It's a powerful name, Hugin and Munin, the ravens who went around the world gathering information for Odin." The doctor adjusted his glasses and then stood up, extending his hand. "It was a pleasure, Miss Midoriya." "Oh no, the pleasure was mine, Doctor," he replied with a smile. "What do you say, Izuku?" "Thank you very much, Doctor." Both green-haired men left, and once they did, the doctor grabbed the phone that was on his desk and dialed a number. Izuku Midoriya. Age 4 years old. Profession, preschool student. Quirk, Odin's Ravens. He can summon hundreds of crows. Anything the crows see, he can see. Additionally, he can switch positions with any crow he wants, in addition to other various abilities. Happiness lasted a long time. Well, you could say that 2 years is not a long time, but for a 4-year-old child it is a lifetime of happiness. After finishing the appointment with Dr. Garaki, the world was totally different now for the boy. His classmates surrounded him and asked him questions. His best friend Bakugo kept saying how incredible the boy's gift was, and he loved to show it off to his other classmates. He had changed. He went from being a withdrawn and crying child to a brave one who loved to talk to everyone he met. But the day came, in mid-November, when 2 hooded men entered the little boy's house. Cautiously and in total silence, they entered the Midoriya house at midnight. First, they grabbed one of the knives that were in the kitchen and searched the mother's room. "She's asleep." "Better, it saves us work." They stood on opposite sides of the woman, one holding a knife and the other positioning himself behind her head. A second later, one of the men turned the woman's head, exposing her neck, and then the other man stabbed her with the knife. It was a quick and silent death. After that, they started looking in the other rooms, first the bathroom, then the storage room where the brooms were, and finally the child's room. They opened the door carefully, and saw him on his bed. Well, remember that the boss wants him alive. I know, it's not the first time we've done this. Didn't we bring anything to drug him with? No, but I could hit him on the chin. You could kill him. It only happened once. Don't be reckless. I'll go to the kitchen to see if they have anything. Well, I'll wait for you. The second man left while the first kept an eye on the boy. As his partner had said, this was not the first time they had done this. It was more of a regular job for them. Some would think they were monsters, but honestly, once you get used to it, it's not that difficult. Okay, they had some alcohol, just use it and I'll knock him out. Yes, whatever you say. They both stood waiting in the doorway and counted. 1, 2, 3. In a flash, both of them pounced on the boy. The second one grabbed him from behind and the first one was about to drug him, but just as he touched him, dozens of crows flew out. The room filled with the sounds of flapping wings and cawing crows. Total chaos. The two men shouted at each other, trying to see something in the darkness created by the crowds. And suddenly, everything disappeared, the crowds were gone, and all they heard was the sound of the door closing. Damn it, the first man shouted as he ran towards the door. He's locked us in. The boy stood paralyzed in front of the door, fear had taken hold of him. And Mom? It was the first thing that came to his mind, but as he heard the screams and knocks on the door over and over again, panic invaded him even more. Desperate, he ran to his mother's room and when he turned on the light he was horrified. He saw his mother standing beside the bed, her head tilted to one side, blood dripping from her neck and staining everything around her. No, please, no, he slowly approached her body, tears coming out of her eyes. Let this be a nightmare, please, and when he was in front of her, he hugged her as tightly as he could. Please wake up, please, why? Why did this have to happen? He screamed as loud as he could, crying and desperate for everything to be nothing more than a nightmare. Soon, the men managed to knock down the door and went to the room to take him away. Thanks to his screams, they found him easily. They grabbed him by the feet and pinned him to the ground. And oh, don't touch me, and oh, she cries, kicks and fights as much as she can, but it's useless. Before he knew it, he had been knocked out and loaded into a van. Izuku stands in front of Dr. Garaki, with handcuffs that nullify his gift and a mixture of terror for what is going to happen to him, resigned to being killed. He can't come to terms with what's happening to him. His mother has just been murdered, he's been kidnapped, and the doctor who diagnosed his gift 2 years ago turns out to be a mad scientist who wants to use him as an experiment. All in less than 2 hours, or more, he doesn't know. Now he is in a dark room filled with tanks of glowing purple water, with 2 men at his side and the doctor a few feet away talking to a screen. I told you, Master, it's an exceptional gift. He's the first of the next generation, and he has so many abilities. Is it that incredible, Garaki? Yes, look, the doctor stopped talking to the screen and turned to the men. You two, take off the handcuffs. Are you sure, sir? Yes, there is nothing to worry about. He is a child, he has no control over his gift. As you say. As quickly as the men removed the handcuffs, Izuku's body turned into hundreds of frenzied crowds. Curse. The 2 men ran around the room trying to catch the crows. It was useless, they just flew a little high, and the men could do nothing more. That will be a problem, said Dr. Garaki, but it does not matter. Soon he will tire, and I will be able to show him his many skills, Master. I'll be waiting for you, Garaki. Of course, Master, don't worry, you know I have everything under control. I think I'll be in Japan next week, so wait until I get there to experiment with the kid. Will you come to Japan, Master? Yes, the boy's gift intrigued me. Until then, wait, and the screen went black. The master is coming. I have to prepare everything for his arrival in a hurry. The doctor grabbed several things and ran out of the room. So what do we do with the child? There was no response. I guess we have to wait for him to come down from there. What if he never does it? He's a kid, he doesn't have much practice with his gift. I don't think he'll last too long up there. The hell continued the next day. Tired of flying and being transformed into a crow, Izuku simply passed out and fell from the roof. One of the men caught him and put the nuisance collar on him. They took him to a damp room with nothing but a wet mattress. It was dark. He didn't know how long he was there, but he knew he would be there for at least a week. They're going to experiment on me later. The situation was still very unreal for him. He was hoping to wake up in his bed with his mom and that this had only been a nightmare. But he knew it wasn't a nightmare, it was real. His mother was dead and he was going to be used as a guinea pig. There is no point in crying, he told himself. In that short time, he had already accepted his fate. He was going to die. It was difficult, and he didn't feel sad about it either. He was going to be reunited with his mother, the most beautiful and sweet woman he had ever met. Maybe in his next life he would be lucky and be born without a gift. He couldn't help but let out a giggle at the thought. 2 years ago, I was very happy to know that I had that gift. The first gift of the new generation, a gift with so many possibilities. And now she wanted to be without him, she wanted him taken away. It felt disgusting, revolting. His gift was the reason for this, only his gift. These people did not care about his life, his mother, or him. All they cared about was his gift. An image appeared in his head. Dr. Garaki died with a knife directly in his jugular, just like his mother. A grotesque thought, but one that, for some reason, the boy longed for with all his heart. A new emotion took hold of him, hatred, a hatred he had never felt before. In just one day, the happy boy who was eager to meet new people changed completely. Now he only felt hatred towards the doctor and disgust towards himself. These feelings shaped him from that moment on. In the days after he was experimented on, he dropped the name Izuku Midoriya and became known to the world by a name that represented everything he was. The Raven of Death. The Way. For a week, Izuku was in that dark room, the only light coming when one of the men opened a small window through which they gave him food. During that week, Izuku could do nothing but think about his mother, about his dream, about his disgust towards his gift and towards himself, about his hatred towards Dr. Garaki and towards the man he called my lord. Until one day, Izuku was woken up by one of the men. For the first time I paid attention to him since I had seen him the day before. He was tall, dark-skinned and had black hair. He took him to a white room, completely clean and with a large mirror on one of the walls. Afterwards, he left the room leaving Izuku completely alone. Seconds later, her nullifying collar snapped open and fell from her neck. Okay, Izuku, let's do this quickly. Show me what you can do with your gift. It was Garaki who was speaking from some speakers that were all over the room. Izuku stood still, staring into the mirror. He had been thinking about this moment for the entire week he was locked away. Those people only wanted his gift, so he would do everything he could to prevent them from taking it. Come on, Izuku, listen to what I tell you, the doctor repeated. Don't make me hurt you. But Izuku did nothing. He stood completely still, staring at the glass on the wall. Then, he felt that something was not right. He felt his ears begin to vibrate little by little until a horrible ringing sound filled the room. Izuku grabbed his ears tightly as he screamed in pain. It was horrible, as if someone was trying to drive a huge nail through his ear. When the sound stopped, Izuku stood up slightly as he looked at the glass. His ears were bleeding and his face was red from tears and pain. Are you going to do it? Asked Garaki. Izuku couldn't help but let out a giggle. He raised his hand and gave the doctor the middle finger. Instantly, the beeping sounded again in the room, until Izuku felt his vision blur and his consciousness fade away. Day after day, he was forced to use his gift. He didn't know how much time passed. Maybe it was just a week, maybe months, maybe even years. It was at one of those moments, when he was alone in the damp room, that he made a wish. Please end this, please God, free me from this torture, please another useless thing I did, ask for help from a being I didn't know existed, like God. As time passed, Izuku hoped that his torture would end, that they would simply lose interest in him and kill him, and so they did. One day, when he was taken back to the White Room, a man he had not seen before he came through the door. He had white hair and red eyes, and gave off an aura that made Izuku tremble in his presence. Are you my lord? She asked, and the man agreed. Are you finally going to kill me? The man smiled. She put her hand on Izuku's forehead and he closed his eyes, waiting for his life to finally end. They were finally going to take it from him. He would leave this world happy. Happy to be reunited with his mother, and happy that he didn't give them his gift. But nothing happened. He felt nothing, and it seems that this very thing surprised the man. How the man chuckled. "You're amazing, kid." Izuku stood completely still. What had he just said? "For 2 years we have been trying to force you to use your gift, but you never did. You endured all the harm we did to you and never showed any sign of weakness. You stood firm. That is admirable." "I hated that man. I hated him. I hated him. I hated him so much, and I wished he was dead." She took 2 years of his life trying to take away his gift, trying to use him as an experiment, and now after trying to kill him, she told him he was amazing. "So I decided to steal your gift and kill you today, but I couldn't steal it. LOL, I can't steal the gift from an 8-year-old, unbelievable. Your hatred towards us, or whatever you feel, makes you have a stronger will than mine." I wanted him to shut up. I wanted him to shut his bucking mouth already. I didn't want to listen to him. In a frenzy of hatred, of immeasurable hatred, Izuku split into hundreds of crowds that attacked the man. "It's a pity. Letting you live would be a problem for me." "Damn it, there's no more beer," said the dark-skinned old man. "I'll have to go get more tomorrow." He walked from his kitchen to his living room, turned on his television, and searched for something entertaining to watch. Young hero debuts in big fight against. Competition between heroes of. Most attractive heroine. Heroes, damn newscasts, they don't know how to talk about anything other than themselves. And so the old man kept flipping through the channels, hoping to find something that wasn't about heroes. At least, until I heard a knock at the door. "Ah, damn it, I'm coming." When he reached the door and opened it, he didn't see anyone. He looked both ways and didn't find anyone either. It wasn't until he looked down that he saw something. It was a small red-eyed crow that looked at him with some curiosity. Since there was no one there, the man went back into his house, but to his great surprise he saw that the same crowd was still there inside on a bar. Little by little the man saw more crowds entering his house. Fear took hold of him. Little by little he walked backwards until he came up against one of the walls. No, this can't be real. The man grabbed his head tightly. Is it possible? Is it him? He looked around in despair because he knew what it meant to see those crows. He had to flee, because death was coming for him. But it was impossible. No one escaped death. Then he saw it, like a dark silhouette appeared on the balcony of his apartment, slowly approaching him, looking at him with those white eyes without pupils, worthy of the monster that was in front of him. "Hello," he said simply. "Please." The man fell to his knees before him as if he were in front of God himself. "Please don't do anything to me," he begged while he began to whimper like a little child. "Do you know who I am?" I have asked. Oh, of course I knew. Who didn't? Everyone knew the messenger of death, the Death Crow, the most hunted villain in the whole world. "And yes, I know, everyone knows it," he replied. "I know who you are too, and I know what you did," she said as she knelt before him. "Tell me, does the name Izuku Midoriya ring a bell?" Yes, I knew the name. It was the name of one of the children he had kidnapped during the years he worked with Dr. Garaki. After he had been kidnapped, the father of that child spent day and night trying to find him with the police. In the end, they were able to get rid of him, but there were still posters with that name all over Mustafasu. Let me help you remember. Suddenly, the feathers that surrounded the crow's entire body fell, revealing a green head of hair and freckles on his face, although the large scar on his face made it difficult to recognize them. "Do you remember me now?" The man approached him, letting the old man pay attention to his face. It was like a bucket of cold water for the man. He was the spitting image of that child, however. No, she repeated to herself while shaking her head from side to side. "It's not possible. That child is dead. I saw it with my own eyes." "Well, I came back from the dead," he replied with a simplicity that terrified the man. "Are you going to kill me?" The man's eyes were pure terror. Thinking about what that monster could do to him, it was horrible. "No, what I want is for you to tell me everything you know about him." "Who?" "All for one." "The dead." "Where am I?" It was the first thing that crossed his mind when he looked around him. There was absolutely nothing, everything was completely black. He felt his feet touching a hard, firm ground, but he couldn't see it. All I saw was absolute darkness. It seemed more like I was falling into the abyss, that I would fall at any moment, and I didn't know what would happen next. Am I dead? I thought. Something like that, boy, a voice answered. Izuku quickly turned his head, prepared for anything, but he couldn't believe what he saw. In front of him were two men or silhouettes? It was difficult to describe them. They had 2 hands, 2 feet, a torso and a head with eyes, but they had no mouth or nose, no hair, and much less skin or anything similar to his. One was completely black with white spots running down from his feet, and the other was white with black spots. Who are they? I have asked. Let's say that the white man began saying, I am death. And I life. SW? Am I dead? No, you are not, answered life. I haven't decided that yet, Death replied. What is there to decide? This child had such an unfair life. SW? Many people die unfairly. We've been doing this since we've existed. I don't understand why you want to bring this one back to life now. Because he could change everything, she said excitedly. This child could create a new era. Only if he follows that path, but that is only one of millions of possible paths he could follow. In fact, he could have followed it. The child is already dead. Don't talk like I'm not here, they both looked at Izuku, who seemed tired of their argument. If you're gods or whatever, you should know what I want. I already wanted to die. I couldn't stand my life anymore. All I want is to be with my mother. You don't understand, Izuku. You could change humanity. You could lead them to an era of complete peace and understanding. I could have done it. I'm already dead. I just want to see my mother. And you think she would want this for you? For you to die after 2 years of being tortured? Izuku hesitated. Don't even think about it. It doesn't matter if you both want that. In the end, I'm the one who makes the decision. Hey, we've been doing this for as long as we've existed, haven't we? Have you ever wanted to do something new? We archive and create the lives of human beings. How about we take part in it? That is not our purpose. He did not create us for that. What if he did? What if that was his goal? What if he wanted us to do it? You don't know that. Either Death hesitated, and a silence took over the place. Izuku, you could live a new, better life, continue living for your mother, and we could break the routine from the beginning of our existence. Could you do me, please? Izuku asked. What do you want? Could I see my mother? Life smiled. Of course. He grabbed Death's hand and said, We will leave you two alone. He snapped his fingers and they both disappeared, while a gray cloud in the shape of a woman appeared in front of the boy. The cloud slowly disappeared until Inko Midoriya took its place. Izuku? The mother looked at her son, confused. Mom. Izuku lunged at his mother, crying and screaming, I miss you so much. What? What are you saying, are they? I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I couldn't save you, I couldn't help you, he continued screaming while soaking his mother with his tears. Hey, calm down. Inko hugged her son back, trying to comfort him. He didn't care where he was or what had happened. The only thing that mattered now was him. It was his son. And his job would be to take care of him as much as he could. The traveler. Coming back to life wasn't what I thought it would be. I had a feeling it would be something more spiritual, something I couldn't describe, but instead it was like waking up from a dream. He simply opened his eyes and moved his body little by little, first his arms, then his legs, and shook himself completely, like a dog that had just been bathed. I'm alive, he said to himself. For a moment, Izuku could do nothing but sit there, staring at the sky and thinking about how to proceed, what he should do. There was one person he wanted to visit before he started, but he knew it would be more of a hindrance than anything else. Then he stood up and divided into hundreds of crows that flew off in different directions. He was going on a journey. He didn't know where, but it didn't matter much. At the end of the day, he would go everywhere. He didn't want to be there. Japan, which had once been a home to him, now only meant a constant reminder of his torture. He knew that if he stayed, sooner or later he would fall into a path of revenge towards those who hurt him. His mother wouldn't want that for him, so he just ran away. Through his crows, his consciousness split, and he lived for years through them. He had split into exactly 192 ravens to travel around the world, 192 countries, from South America to the Middle East, not counting Japan, of course. In Mexico and South America, he saw drug traffickers take control and subject most countries to a wave of violence. In the United States, Canada, and Europe, I have witnessed depravity that was out of control. The purchase of small children to satisfy the twisted minds of some, demonstrations of the dirtiest hex in the middle of the streets and on public roads, and elites living in a bubble of privilege. In Africa, he saw slavery of children and men forced to work all day without rest, if they did not want to die. He also saw the most extreme poverty, caused by corrupt businesses in rich countries. In Asian countries, he saw many things, from dictatorships, such as in North Korea, to the sheer and horrible superficiality in South Korea, to organ trafficking in China. In the Middle East, he saw how the Muslim religion abused women, murdered homosexuals, and led wars against each other, using their God as an excuse. At the same time, while traveling and learning, he kept fit on an abandoned island in Oceania. I have survived by eating fish and building a small shelter. His goal? To train and strengthen his physique for when he began to intervene in the world. 7 years later, the day came when he decided to act. He decided to help those who had suffered the same as him, the children who were sold to the powerful and rich. Through his travels, he learned that this problem was more concentrated in certain countries, so he started in the first and most abundant country of these businesses, Mexico. A complex country, with a people who believed themselves to be clever, corrupt rulers who were pitiful every time they tried to prove otherwise, and finally, violent and bloodthirsty criminals who were kind to the people. At least the leaders. The henchmen were nothing more than a bunch of idiots who believed themselves to be great. The Great Awakening of the Quirks had only made the situation in the country worse. Criminals used them to unleash even more chaos, leaders used them as puppets to entertain the people, and others used them to show off and ridicule their neighbors. For 6 years he was there, fighting battles, killing criminals, leading those who decided to fight, and freeing the victims. He was 20 years old when he left Mexico. Clearly that took him to other places. During his time in Mexico, he also traveled to the United States and Canada, and after leaving the country, he was in Brazil, Nigeria, India, Russia, Thailand, and finally, China. He was already over 40 years old when he arrived in China. His name was already known. To ordinary people, heroes and corrupt or ignorant governments, he was a villain, the world's greatest criminal who was dedicated to plundering the countries where he had been. But for the kidnapped, for the freedom fighters, and for those who knew the truth, he was a symbol of struggle, a hope for freedom. But then something happened that forced him to return to the origin of his travels, Japan. He was chasing a gang of kidnappers in Beijing. For weeks he was on their trail, following their trail, making sure he located the exact location where they were holding the children. Turning into a raven to gain entry was not possible. They knew he was behind them, and, according to rumors, "Whenever you see a crow, run away, because death is behind you." So he did it the old-fashioned way, entering that lair at midnight, silently killing each guard. But upon entering the place where he believed the children were, he found it was empty. There were no children, just 2 Chinese men smoking and arguing. When they both saw him, they froze in fear. Slowly, he approached them, staring at them, alternating his gaze between them. "Where are the children?" he asked in Chinese. They both looked at each other in confusion. Then, he roughly grabbed one of them by the neck and lifted him up. "Where are they?" he asked again. Buddha, he replied repeatedly. "I don't know." The other man walked away quickly and pulled out a gun. "What the hell?" I shouted as I shot him. It split into several crows and then reappeared behind the man, grabbed him by the back of the neck and slammed him repeatedly against the ground. Then he turned to the other and, in a threatening tone, said, "If you don't want to end up like your friend, you'd better tell me everything you know." "What fashi was Shenmi do Bujidao? I swear I don't know anything," he shouted desperately, but the man started hitting him in the face. Tell me where they are. If I tell you, he'll kill me. And if you're lucky, when you tell me what I want, I'll let you live. He hit her hard again. I don't know anything, I swear. I just know that a man in Japan took them. To man? Give me names. We don't know his name, but I know someone who works with him, a doctor. To doctor? From there, something gave him a horrible thorn. And yes, doctor. I don't know his name, nor where to find him. That's all I know, I swear. He released the man and disappeared from the place. Days later, he was investigating the doctor he had been told about. Over the past 25 years, he had never heard of a doctor in Japan who kidnapped children, but he did know of one. Orange. For a long time he thought about how he should proceed, while he looked out over the entire city from one of his buildings, but deep down he knew. He would return to Japan. After so many years, he would return to the land where he was born and where he died. The past. Japan, compared to the rest of the countries, did not represent a threat, all thanks to the number one hero there, All Might, the most powerful hero, who, at 50 years old, continued to prove to be an unstoppable force for any villain who tried to commit a crime. Luckily, Izuku's time in Mexico coincides with the time that All Might was in the United States. They never had any contact, but he knew that All Might was a man worthy of his nickname, the symbol of peace. It was thanks to him that Japan maintained such a low crime rate of only 8%. Izuku was grateful for this, as Japan was the only place that didn't have any policing, and he was glad that such an upstanding man like All Might kept order. Izuku wondered if All Might had been a hero in his childhood, would he have saved him? God, why am I thinking this? It's useless to worry about it, he said to himself. He had this habit of rambling when he was still, but returning to Japan was harder than he thought. Memories of the days he lived there hit him, the happiness, how simple his life was back then. When he left, he didn't hesitate for a second. He didn't think about his friend Masaru, his uncles, his classmates, not even his mother. Well, at least not about her body. What had happened to her? Did they find her? Or had her body rotted away in that room without anyone noticing? Did they hold a funeral for her? And him? Did they look for him? Did they put up posters? What happened to the investigation? The heroes? The police? The cameras? The more he thought about it, the angrier he felt, the more he wanted to throw everything to hell. But he couldn't. He didn't do this for pleasure. He did it because it was his duty, so that no one else would suffer the same fate. When he arrived in Japan, he went straight to his hometown, Mustafesu, and there he found several old posters looking for him. He has traveled all over the city, divided into dozens of crows, looking for any suspicious or abandoned place that could have some connection to his past. Before long, I found it, a warehouse full of old cars on the outskirts of the city. Inside, in the only office in the place, he found a hatch under the desk, which led him to a network of underground tunnels with several rooms. Although filled with mold, rats, and dirt, Izuku recognized them instantly. One of them was Dr. Garaki's laboratory, where he had had the conversation with my lord. The damp room where he had been held. The white room where he had been tortured. The next day, he did more research on the warehouse and found a news story from over 30 years ago. The police and some heroes had broken into there, searching for several missing children, including his name. But they found no children, only the abandoned place and, most valuable, the DNA of a suspect, Yoko Tanaka. He immediately recognized the man in the photo. He was one of the men who had kidnapped him. After finding his address, he broke into his house at midnight, tied him up and hung him from the ceiling to interrogate him. "Where's the doctor?" he asked, hitting the ground with a bat. "I told you I don't know anything," the man pleaded. "I was just used as bait. When they put me in jail, I stopped working for them." "How am I sure you're telling the truth?" The man showed a terrified expression, but then he shouted. "My partner Hiroshi Suzuki, he continued working with the doctor and all for one after I was imprisoned. I don't know where he lives exactly, but I know he's in Hosu." Izuku thought that all for one must be the man they called my lord. What a ridiculous name. He hesitated for a few seconds, but finally decided to follow the trail. Not before threatening the man. If I find out that you told anyone about what I'm doing, I assure you that you will die a slow and painful death. Understood? And yes. So now he was sitting in the living room of one of the men who had kidnapped him, with a cup of tea in his hands, shaking with fear. So tell me, what do you know? That's the only reason I came. What do you want to know? Anything would help me. A memory prevented him from finishing. He remembered something All for One had told him. You are amazing, he whispered. What? Do you know why he told me? Why did he tell me you're amazing? Oh, that the man seemed indecisive but soon looked at Izuku with fear and began to speak. It's a long story, but from what I know, all that started more than 100 years ago. Izuku frowned. 100 years ago? Is All for One that old? What does that have to do with what he told me? See, could you stop interrupting me? The man said, covering his mouth as if he were a small child who had just been scolded. Yes, sorry. No. You're right. Go on. The man recounted how All for One had been at war with a group of people who passed down a gift from generation to generation. Every time he tried to steal that gift, he was repelled by the willpower of the wielders. When he tried to steal it from Izuku and realized he couldn't, he told him those words. You're amazing. An 8-year-old boy had accumulated so much determination, so much hatred, that he had achieved what those who tried to destroy him had taken generations to achieve. That's why he told you. Izuku couldn't help but smile, but he also felt incredibly angry. The laughter was due to those carriers. He was happy. It seemed that there were people who were trying to stop him, but he also felt angry for those words. What a shit, but as always, it wasn't worth thinking about it. And now? What else do you know? What happened after my death? What can you tell me about All for One? Well, if you want to know about All for One, I can only tell you that he's dead. Dead? Well, not completely dead, but he basically lost most of his body and head. He was the current bearer of the gift, All Might. Now All for One is hidden. As for what happened after your death, that's a longer story. I have time. Well, after my death, my mother's boss called the police for her absence from work and quickly ended up finding her body. I was reported missing, and due to the inefficiency of the authorities, several people protested by attacking some heroes and police officers. My story became famous, but it was not only thanks to the Bakugo family. My father was there too. Hiroshi told me how he, more than anyone else, did everything possible to get the authorities to act. They had even threatened him, but he kept pushing, although he gave up when the warehouse where they were suspected to be was found empty. The doctor, afraid of being found, moved his research center to Tokyo, leaving the warehouse empty a few weeks before they managed to find him and using Yoko as bait. Since then the complaints have decreased, but there are still people who have protested about that old case. After that, Hiroshi continued working for Garaki until recently he asked to leave, and as a sign of gratitude for his service they let him live quietly. At least until they know you've arrived, he said with fear. When they know that the Raven of Death is here, they will surely come to kill me. You deserve it. Thank you for this information, and I jump out into the street. When he was leaving the supermarket, he saw some thieves running away while several citizens screamed in fear. With no other choice, he transformed and began to chase them. Once he caught them and took photos with his fans, he returned home, but someone stopped him. A middle-aged man, muscular, bearded and with green hair, with scars all over his face, highlighting one that ran across his entire face, dressed in a jacket and suit, was in front of him. With a serious face he stared at him and slowly approached him. A middle-aged man, muscular, bearded and with green hair, with scars all over his face, highlighting one that ran across his entire face, dressed in a jacket and suit, was in front of him. With a serious face he stared at him and slowly approached him. All Might, my name is Izuku Midoriya and I would like you to help me, he said as he extended his scarred hand. The plan. All Might looked at him with curiosity and caution. The man's attitude was completely suspicious, and he knew what he looked like in his civilian form. He closed his eyes and tried to act confused, pretending he didn't know what he was talking about and that he didn't look anything like All Might. But then the man told him something that completely changed his concept of All Might. I know that All for One killed your teacher, and he also knows about your mysterious gift. Seconds later, I was facing the powerful symbol of peace, with a look of fury and without smiling. From now on, you better watch every word you say, he threatened him. The peace symbol was taller than him, almost 30 centimeters, and he had to admit it. It was damn intimidating, but he wouldn't bend for something like that. I know what it feels like. He killed my mother and also kidnapped me to use me as an experiment. All Might's gaze softened a little when he told him that, but he still didn't trust him. That's why I want to make a deal. You and I, working together, will stop him. All for One is dead, I made sure of that. So please leave me alone and get out of here, sir. He transformed back into his civilian form and walked past Izuku. Are you just going to ignore what I say? He replied as he started walking behind the hero. Why should I listen to a stranger? Why are you kidnapping children? All Might instantly stopped. I already told you, 32 years ago on All for One's orders I was kidnapped, but they haven't stopped there. 2 weeks ago I was chasing a man. I thought they had kidnapped children, but when I arrived they told me that a doctor had taken them to Japan. That doctor was the one who experimented on me more than 30 years ago. Izuku clenched his hand furiously, remembering all the hatred he once felt towards him. You think you finished him off, but the reality is that he's still alive, and the longer he is, the more innocent children will suffer the consequences. His words made All Might reconsider. He knew it, he didn't understand why, but he knew he was being sincere. He noticed it in his words, he felt his hatred and he recognized it, since he also felt that hatred. All Might was now watching as that man turned on his stove and began to cook seafood that he had bought while they were coming to his house, as well as some cans of beer. You know, when I escaped from All for One, I went to live on an abandoned island, he began to say while moving a bread with onion, chopped garlic and shrimp. I basically survived by eating fish and shrimp, and while I made trips to places like Mexico I learned some good recipes. The words sounded sad, but there was also a certain happiness. They felt almost nostalgic. But I saw a lot of people suffering in this world, so I decided I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He added a little parsley and lemon. So while I'm here I'll make sure no child suffers my same fate, and then I served it on a plate that I put in front of All Might and you. Why did you decide to become a hero? Then he served himself some and started eating. All Might looked at the plate with curiosity. He had to admit, it looked delicious and smelled delicious. And he had also served himself, so it didn't look like he had put something in it to make it poisonous. So he tried it. He had to admit, it was very delicious. After trying it he looked at Izuku and sighed. My family was murdered when I was a child. Since then I realized that there was a lot of evil in this world. Society needed to catch someone who, when people saw him, they would know that everything was fine. I dedicated my whole life to being that caught. I see. And your teacher? How did you meet her? All Might couldn't help but let out a small laugh. She saved me from some criminals. After that I spent entire weeks chasing her, asking her to train me. She didn't pay the slightest attention to me. I remember she was so fed up with me that she started jumping off buildings and I chased her all over the city. I don't know why, but one day she asked me why I did it. I shared my dream with her, and that seemed to convince her. Then the hero looked at Izuku curiously and asked, you said you knew about my gift, but what do you know? I know it's a gift that has been passed down from generation to generation and that it was created to defeat All for One, that's all. Basically the same as me. His name is One for All, by the way. That's a stupid name. All Might almost fell back when I heard them say that mine is called Odin's Ravens, an equally stupid name, right? I think it's a good name, he replied. It's garbage, he said while taking out a can of beer. Do you want it? The hero gladly accepted. Well, I was 6 years old when I put it on, but the truth is I would have changed it a long time ago, although it's not like I could. I'm dead to the system. Dead? Yes, they did an investigation when I disappeared, and after escaping from All for One I didn't think I should come back. Since they never found me they left me for dead. He gave his beer a great deal of care, and then slammed it down on the table. I'm not surprised you don't know me. When it happened you were in the United States. Although if you go to Mustaface you'll find many photos of me as a child. He took a last sip of his beer and then crushed it and threw it away. When you first spoke to me I obviously didn't know who you were, he started to say while drinking his beer. Being kidnapped, tortured, having people experiment on you, living on an island, traveling to different countries, he said while putting his beer aside. Who are you? How is it possible that I haven't heard anything about you? Izuku put aside the new beer he was going to drink and looked at All Might with extreme seriousness. When you see a crow, run away, because death is behind you. Does that sound familiar? The hero looked confused, so Izuku continued, I'm not surprised you don't know that phrase. Only villains know it. You say you don't know me, but the truth is that for more than 20 years people have heard about me. Feathers began to grow all over Izuku's body until they basically surrounded him, covering all of his skin, and his face began to transform into that of a giant bird, changing his jaw into a huge beak. And now? Do you recognize me? All Might stepped back as he transformed into his muscular version. I guess so. You are the Raven of Death. Correct. In an instant the feathers fell from his body, and he calmly went back to eating the shrimp and drinking beer. Don't you think that if he wanted to hurt you he would have done it already? All Might walked slowly towards him, admitting that he was right about that, and as he asked so several questions came to his head, each one about the man's intentions. Do you really believe what they say about me? After our little talk? But the hero didn't answer. Do you know why I came for your help? When they told me about your gift, about how generation after generation has tried to stop All for One, I was very happy. You of all people would understand my pain and help me because that was the mission you had, but also that it was because I admire you. He admitted you are what I needed as a child and what I wanted to aspire to. A hero who tries to save everyone. With a big smile he got up from the bar, but not before taking another beer. If you don't want to help me I will understand and I will leave. You will not see me again, and I will not reveal your secret. Silence fell over the room as All Might pondered the situation, but was quick to agree to help Izuku by having him sit back down at the table. Well then, let's talk about what matters, what we need to defeat All for One. I'm listening. Shit, he ran and ran, but it was inevitable. There it comes. He couldn't escape. It was too late. He was already behind him. He couldn't hear his steps, but he heard the flapping of his wings. There was a lot of noise that night, cars honking, people shouting and dogs barking, and still I heard it. I heard the flapping of his wings. I heard how that damn demon approached him. I could turn around and see death. No, I have refused. He didn't want to die, he didn't want to see death, he would run, he didn't care about anything, he just wanted to escape. Holy shit, he screamed as he tripped over something. Holy shit, for a moment he saw him. In fact, he didn't see him, he only saw those red eyes that left a trail wherever he went. I don't want to die, please. And total silence. He thought he was dead. He couldn't hear anything anymore, not the cars, not the people, not the dogs, and much less that damn flapping. His heart raced 1,000 miles an hour. He backed away, trying not to faint from the scare he had had, until he crashed into a wall. She let out a huge scream as she laughed, cried and screamed. She didn't know how to feel. Her emotions were so mixed up that she started hitting the ground in desperation. It was finally over. He was fine. Nothing would happen to him. You don't want to die? A primary instinct took over him and only told him one thing. Run. The next day, Tokyo police went on alert. A man was found hanging from a building in the city, with a bandage on his forehead that said, Monster. Without eyes, without tongue, without teeth, with multiple cuts all over his body. The scariest thing is that they had opened his chest, taken out his heart, and glued it to his hand. Finally, a crow was found next to the body, but it was not a normal crow, it was one with red eyes. Everyone knew what it meant. The villains and the corrupt were filled with fear, the heroes prepared themselves, and the people took refuge. It was a declaration of war, a warning to everyone. Death was there, so everyone had to run because it was after them. The room was tense. Murmurs and voices could be heard throughout the room as more than 15 heroes, most of them from the top 10 heroes of Japan, sat at a large table. SW? Why did they bring us here? Hero number 2 Endeavor asked aggressively. Isn't it obvious? It's about him, number 3 Beast Genius replied as he pointed at the screen showing the man's body being lowered from the Tokyo building. We formed a special force to capture him, right? The Death Crow. That bastard? The bastard must be strong, no? After all, in more than 20 years you haven't caught him, shouted number 5 Mirko. What makes you think we can catch him? The door of that room opened and the most important hero of all entered, so important that all the heroes, except Endeavor, stood up to show respect. All Might. The difference is that we have contact with him, said the symbol of peace while he was at the head of the table. A couple of hours ago he contacted me. All the heroes tensed and raised their voices, but All Might raised his hand to keep them silent. There is something I want to confess. I need you to set up a meeting with these heroes. Izuku handed him a folder filled with more than 15 sheets of information on several heroes. You'll tell them that I made contact with you to finish off All for One, and you accepted, but that in reality you're just tricking me to catch us both, Izuku said as he sipped his beer. They will ask why you needed to contact me. I don't think they will believe any story. That's why I'll need you to reveal your scar and your past with All for One. My past with All for One? Including my gift? You should know that that is a resounding no. All of that is a secret. Izuku sighed upon hearing that. I knew you would say that. I must admit that I think that keeping all that a secret doesn't help anyone, but I don't need you to reveal that either. I don't need you to tell me your entire past or your 3-hour limit of being a hero. What I need is for you to. A long time ago there was a villain known as All for One, the murderer of my teacher, and for a long time he built an empire of evil. He began to say, because of him I went to the United States. I was escaping. 2 years ago I met him again, and we had a fight. Then he lifted his shirt showing his huge scar. I finished him off. Or so I thought. While he did this to me. SW? That's your confession? What does it have to do with the bird? Endeavor asked again with his aggressive tone. And why would the Death Raven make contact with you? Wouldn't it be counterproductive? Number 6 Edgeshot asked. Don't forget that you made contact with the most wanted and dangerous villain in the world. Why didn't you mention it before? We could have avoided that scene in Tokyo. Rock asked. How will that help convince them to help us? You really don't understand? You're not just a pillar or symbol. All Might. People basically consider you invincible. They think that no one can defeat you, as if you were some kind of deity. Showing them that scar will prove that All for One is someone really powerful. They will ask a lot of questions about that. I've got you covered. What I just told you is a secret, so I would appreciate your discretion. The symbol of peace continued. The Raven contacted me because he needed my help. Somehow he found out about my past and said that he had unfinished business with me and confessed to me that he was not dead. I did not mention it before because I thought we had a great opportunity here, so I created a plan. What makes you think he's not working for that All for One? Beast Genist asked. Because it doesn't make sense. All for One knows that he thought he was dead. Why reveal that he was alive? Would he really think that he would just sit back? That he wouldn't try to stop him? The room fell silent as doubtful glances crossed. The time we spoke he told me that he would make sure to get All for One's attention to see if he would recruit him into his plans. I didn't think he would go to this extreme, so I sincerely apologize. Your apologies are of no use to us, Brad intervened, the withdrawn hero Gran Torino. So what's next from here? If the plan goes well, I will soon be in All for One's ranks and I will be passing information to you and the heroes. They will believe that they caught us both, but the truth is that I will be very far from there. All Might looked at him with slight doubt, but still continued talking. He is the only person in Japan who experiments with children, so my path will end here. What are you going to do next? Asked the number 1 hero. I guess I'll go to the Middle East or North Korea. Have you ever thought about being a real hero? Izuku looked at him confused. Be a hero? I stopped thinking about being that a long time ago. My reputation wouldn't let me. I already have my hands stained with too much blood. Yeah, well, you still are. You've done more for it than many people. Yeah, I guess. But it's not because I want to be a hero. Izuku smiled as he remembered his motivation. I do this for my mother. As all the heroes left the Salt, All Might sighed. He was tired. He could no longer use his 3 hours efficiently. He had used 1 hour and a half in this meeting, so he would hurry to get home so as not to waste more. It's a truly intelligent plan. All Might. Sir Night-Eye appeared behind him while observing him with a sour look. You will use the most powerful heroes of Japan to catch All for One and the Death Crow. Nothing like your time 2 years ago, when you wanted to do the first thing totally alone. Oh, Sir Night-Eye, it's a pleasure to see you, and thank you, I suppose. How is young Togata? He said a little uncomfortably. He's fine as always, she responded as the room fell into a sudden silence. You know, when you called me to this meeting, I didn't know what to expect, since you were one of those who preferred to do everything alone, and when I heard this, she sighed, I know this couldn't have been your idea. Huh? You're not fooling me, Tashinori. You're making a plan? Asking for help? This isn't something you would do. What are you implying? He asked in a challenging manner while he stood side by side with the glasses-wearing hero. Nothing bad really, he answered while adjusting his glasses. It's just that something weird is going on with you. All Might snorted, annoyed. I don't have time for this, and he left the room while screaming inside, terrified. It hadn't been 1 hour since the plan had started, and they already suspected him. I hope it works. The unknown and the known. Susan Sato woke up happy from her bed. Today was a great day for her, since after leaving school she would go out with her best friend and her crush since he was in elementary school, Katsuki Bakugo. Now she happily walked down the stairs of her house in her pajamas of her favorite heroine Mirko. Good morning, she shouted, hoping her father would answer, but no one did. Daddy? Susan walked through the kitchen and dining room until she reached the living room. Oh, there you are. Her father didn't seem to notice her. He seemed too busy watching the news. This morning Keitaro Shishio's body was found hanging from one of the buildings in Tokyo. Here are some photos. Discretion is recommended. She let out a sigh of terror when she saw the photos. That man had no eyes, no tongue, no teeth. He had a bandage around his forehead that said monster, and his heart had been torn out and placed in his hand. God, how horrible! Soon her father realized that she was there, so he turned off the TV. Oh, daughter, I hadn't seen you. He got up from the sofa and grabbed her hand. Are you hungry? I made rice for breakfast, he said as he took her to the kitchen. Is everything okay? You look scared, I asked. Huh. Of course, it's okay. Why do you say that? Safe? Well, Susan sat in the dining room waiting for her father to serve her food. I know I promised you would go out with Katsuki today, but I don't think you'll be able to. Susan was so shocked that she let out a high-pitched squeal as she stood up. Why not? Hi, understand me, it's dangerous. Is it because of what happened on the news? Oh, Dad, he's just a weird villain. The heroes will take care of them. He's not just a villain. Normally he would have discussed that with his father, but he didn't. Her father had always been very overprotective of her. She understood and did not blame him. Many years ago he had another son and a wife, but they were murdered. Every time I went out there was a new danger, a new dangerous person, but unlike those times I felt tremendous terror. It wasn't the terror of losing her daughter or anything like that. It was something different. She didn't know exactly what, but she knew it was something worse, much, much worse. Susan, her father began to say with extreme seriousness, the person who did that monster is not a normal villain. Then he took her hand. Many people have suffered because of him, innocent people. Little by little he began to generate more pressure on his hand. You had not even been born. It was more than 20 years ago in Mexico. An entire city, honey, an entire city, more than 10,000 people were found dead, children, honey, children. She felt her father begin to tremble, so she decided to stop him. Daddy, she started to say while grabbing his cheeks, everything will be okay, okay? You're the future #1 heroine, and I'll be with Ka-chan, don't worry, okay? Okay, he stood up and kissed his daughter's forehead before serving her food and saying goodbye. Don't be late for school, understood? Yes, take care, Daddy. When he arrived at his classroom, he noticed the murmurs and whispers. Everyone seemed very happy while they were talking and looking at their phones. What's wrong? He asked happily. Didn't you see the news, Sato-chan? One of his classmates answers, more outrageous than anything. Oh, it's from that villain. That villain? It's not just that villain, Sato-san. Another of his companions begins to say the Death Crow is the villain. He has been in more than 7 countries and in more than 20 years they haven't caught him. For years? I thought they only knew him for what happened in Mexico. Oh, that was just the reason they started looking for him. But he's done so much more. Brazil, Nigeria, India, Russia, Thailand, China, and now Japan. He must have had a good reason to come here. How don't talk nonsense. If that bastard showed up, I could finish him off by myself this time. His best friend, Katsuki Bakugo, answers. Ka-chan. Susan runs towards her best friend and hugs him tightly. How have you been? Yeah, well, at least until I had to see your face, I answered mockingly, earning an elbow from the green-haired girl. She lets out a small squeal as she puffs out her cheeks and spins around dramatically. I try to be nice to you and you treat me like this. I'm sorry, he answers as he approaches her and hugs her from behind. I miss you, I whisper to the hate. Blah, how disgusting, get a room, his companions said at the same time. Susan laughed as she listened to her friend scream. Classes went by quickly as she played and joked with her friends, but the topic of conversation never changed. All day long she only heard the same thing, the death crow that, the death crow this. The good thing is that classes ended and she went out with Katsuki to start their date. Ready? Katsuki asked as he grabbed her hand. God, you don't know how long I've been waiting for this, he replied, smiling when he felt his friend's hand. Then he decided to pay full attention to his partner while completely forgetting about that strange villain he had talked about all day. After all, he is alone. An unknown. As he woke up, he felt like his other consciences were doing so his mind was filled with thousands of images. Each one was like a live camera of his crows. Unlike what one might think, his crows were not simply pets or something similar. He did not control them. Rather, his crows were a hive mind. Extensions of their body. So basically each crow had a consciousness that was influenced by feelings. Soon he felt someone's body next to him. He looked and it turned out to be a young woman, maybe in her 20s, brunette and short hair, totally naked. Yes, he had to admit that he was never good at containing his desires for carnal pleasure. Perhaps one day he would die from it, but he took precautions not to do so. He got out of bed and turned on the TV, and the first thing that appeared was the news. The death crow is famous for many incidents, among them and the most famous was the one that happened in Mexico. Change of channel. The death crow is change channel. One of the most feared and wanted villains, he changed the channel again. Searching in more than 12 countries, he does it again. More than 10,000 people dead, he changed the channel trying to find something that wasn't about him, and when he didn't, he threw the remote at the wall. He got up from his bed and walked to the bathroom to be able to wet his face. He turned on the faucet, wet his hands, and when he was going to wet his face, he saw him. Why do I have to remember it? Why? They always talked about what happened in Mexico that day. They had long since gotten over it. He no longer had nightmares about that night. He no longer saw the children he cut in half or the women he hung with his entrails. But the memory of waking up covered in blood that was not his always came back to him. Blood of men, blood of women, and blood of children. Every second I regretted what I did. It's useless to think about it, he told himself. Whenever he remembered, he would tell himself. However, how could he not think about that night? He has declared war on an entire country, and they would make him remember what he was, a monster and a murderer. Luckily for him, something interrupted him, a vision of his crows. Not far from there, one of his crows listened to the conversation of two people. Are you sure this is a good plan? Asked the first subject, a gray-haired man smoking a cigarette. Of course, I'm sure he'll agree with the plan, the second light blue-haired man replied. If it works, we'll have one of the most feared villains in the world, he said as he clenched his fist tightly. We'll kill All Might in the most humiliating way possible. He changed position with his raven, and as if he were a demon, he came down from the roof where he was and landed silently behind them. Both men stepped back in surprise while he alone approached. Do you know who I am? Both men nodded, causing a macabre smile to form on her face. Of course you know who I am. Everyone knew Death. The goodbye. At first he thought they were no one important, just small-time villains he would use to find out more about Dr. Garaki and All for One. But as soon as those two presented their plans to him, he discovered that in some way Garaki was working for them, and if he was working for them, it meant that in some way they were working with All for One. It's called Nomus, said the light blue-haired guy whose name was Tamura Shigaraki, as he showed her a huge black-skinned monster with an exposed brain. The latest in biological engineering, as strong as All Might but more powerful. He looked at the Nomu as he walked around him. As strong as All Might? How are you so sure? Shigaraki smiled at the question. He has more than two gifts, super regeneration and shock absorption, he said. Thanks to one of our allies, Dr. Garaki, we have been able to give him superhuman strength naturally. Shigaraki clenched both fists tightly and looked at him. Garaki? The director of Jaku General Hospital? He asked. So do you know who All for One is? From that conversation I learned a lot of valuable information that I quickly passed on to All Might. Soon they would storm Jaku General Hospital and stop All for One once and for all. But before executing his plan he had something to do. It would be his last chance before leaving Japan forever. So one day he walked to Mustafesu and climbed the stairs of a large building until he reached the 17th floor. He knocked on the door and heard footsteps approaching. Hello? A cute green-haired girl opened the door and looked at him curiously. I stared at her, surprised and angry. After all, she was identical to him, identical to his mother. Damn Hisashi, he thought to himself angrily. Is everything all right, sir? The girl asked curiously. Excuse me, girl, but is Hisashi Sato living here? Oh, I'm sorry, my dad is at work. Your dad? So you're Susan, right? Do you know me? Not in person, but yes, I'm an old friend of Hisashi's. Would you mind if I stopped by? The girl seemed to hesitate, but after a few seconds she nodded and let him pass. He looked around the house. It was big, very big. It was also elegant and had many ostentatious decorations. If you want, you can sit in the living room. My dad will be here soon. Thank you very much, girl. She sat on the couch waiting for her father while Susan watched her from the other side of the room. And what is your name? He asked. You can call me Corvus, he responded quickly. Corvus? It's the first time I've heard a name like that. Where are you from? It's a Latin name, it means crow. Well, that sounds amazing, he started to say. It's also the first time I've seen another person with green hair. Oh, really? Yep, it doesn't seem like a very common color, lol. I see my mother had green hair, in fact you remind me a lot of her. Ha ha ha, really? And what is she like? Is she pretty? She was very nice, she cared a lot about me, but she died a long time ago. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't worry, girl, and how is Hisashi like a father? Well, he also worries a lot about me, ha ha ha, but he is a great father. Wow, I remember him as a disaster of a father. He paused briefly and continued speaking. Has he ever told you about them? Whose? From Izuku and Inko, Susan's face quickly turned bitter. A little, it's still painful for him, he said while clenching his fists in frustration. Did you meet them? Something like that. And what were they like? Well, he was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Daughter Papa's here, she stopped as she saw a complete stranger in her living room. Hello? Who are you? Huh? You don't know him, Dad? I thought you were friends. Did he tell you he knew him? She asked, to which her daughter agreed. Susan, come here right now. But... Please come here, I repeated in a more severe tone, to which his daughter obeyed. After she stood behind her father. Who sent you? What are you talking about? Do you think you're the first one who comes to hurt me? I didn't come to hurt you, I just want to talk, he said while raising his hands. About what? Little girl, would you mind going up to your room? I'd like to talk to your father alone. Susan looked at her father, who agreed and ordered her to leave. And what do you want to talk about? He instantly transformed, letting feathers grow all over his body. Do you know who I am? I asked as I approached Hisashi. The terrified man was about to scream for his daughter, but was stopped by El Cuervo, who appeared behind him with his hand covering his mouth and another grabbing his neck. Scream and I'll not only finish you off, but I'll make sure your daughter suffers when I come for her. Terrified, he agreed. Fine, he said, letting the feathers fall. Like I said, I didn't come to hurt you, I just wanted to talk to you. Why? He answered while holding his throat, and the crow remained silent. Do you know who I am? He asked again. Yes, I know, you are the Raven of Death, everyone knows who you are. You really don't recognize me? I have questioned. I don't understand, I've never seen you in my life. I haven't seen you in my entire life either, he replied while rolling his eyes. Is this a joke? You come to my house, threaten me and my daughter, and then you say you've never seen me. Hisashi felt immense sadness. He was going to die, and that bastard was going to do who knows what to his little daughter. Why does this have to happen? Tears came out of the man as he slowly began to break down. Oh, Inko, forgive me. The crow lifted him off the ground, grabbing him by the neck. Don't you dare use his name, Hisashi. As the man struggled to breathe, something awakened in him. The green hair, the freckles, and his eyes, they were just like hers. The scar on his face made it difficult to notice those details, but doubt invaded Hisashi. Izuku? Instantly, the crow released him. You finally recognize me? In fact, you don't recognize me. You never saw me when I was a child, did you? No, it's not possible. You're dead. Do you blame yourself for that? No, this isn't real. This isn't real. His son rolled his eyes and crouched down towards the man. Hisashi said while grabbing him by the shoulder, this is real. I am your son. I am Izuku. The man looked at him as tears welled up in his eyes again. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He stood up and grabbed both of his son's shoulders while shaking them desperately. Why are you sorry? He asked with a poker face. It was my fault, she said, crying. It was my fault. What happened to you and to Inko? It wasn't your fault, his son quickly replied. What? He looked at his son in disbelief. It wasn't your fault, Hisashi, she repeated. It's not your fault what happened that night. At least I don't blame you, and I know she wouldn't either. Hisashi was silent as he looked at his son and didn't understand why. Why was this son he had never met appearing out of nowhere at his door? I just came to say goodbye. His son stood up and walked away from him. Soon I will leave Japan and I will never return. I wanted you to know that I am alive. He approached the door and opened it, but was stopped by his father. Wait. That? See, can you stay? I'd like to talk more. I know you don't. Be still. That? Shut up, Hisashi. Don't you understand? He approached his father and with an angry face said to him, I don't blame you for what happened that night, but I do blame you for what she suffered. Do you know how many jobs she had? All the sacrifice she made for me? You blame yourself for the wrong things. Is that why you adopted the girl? To fill that void? I don't want to fix anything in your life with my presence. I just wanted to say goodbye. He walked away again and opened the door. Don't try to be a good father after 40 years. And he left, hoping never to see him again. Brother. Masaru was always an extremely calm child. Unlike other children, he didn't like to run and shout all over the yard while chasing each other. Masaru liked reading, silence, just being in a comfortable place while eating popsicles. There was nothing better for him. Maybe that's why he was never a person with many friends. But at least I have Izuku. That was what was always said. She couldn't remember a life without Izuku. After all, they grew up together, from their mother's wombs, their first words, their first steps, their first days of kindergarten. Always together, always by each other's side. To say they were best friends was an understatement. They were basically brothers. Very good brothers. That tranquility was threatened when their gifts were awakened. They never stood out much. They didn't get good grades. They weren't very talkative. They were basically invisible to their teachers and their peers. When Masaru awakened his gift, no one said anything to him. No one even noticed. After all he did was sweat a liquid on his hands that, when he rubbed them, made little explosions, nothing impressive. The complete opposite of Izuku. Being able to split into hundreds of crows. See everything the crows saw? Switch places between each of the crowds? It was an incredible gift, the gift of the new generation. All eyes were on him, all his peers, all the adults. You're going to be a great hero, they said. You're destined for something amazing, they commented. Then the rest of his classmates began to hang out with the green-haired boy more and more. Some would think that the boy would forget about Masaru completely, but that wasn't the case. Their bond simply grew stronger. What did take a huge turn was the little green-haired boy's personality. He stopped being as quiet and calm as Masaru. He became very outgoing and daring, convincing him to do crazy things like going alone to the forest. Don't worry, Masaru, everything will be okay. I'm here, she would tell him, and he would automatically give in to his friend's pranks. His life was good. Amazing, in fact. But life was also cruel. and Masaru knew it when his best friend, the boy he grew up with and loved like a brother, disappeared from one day to the next. Do you know how that felt? How that could have affected a child of just 6 years old. All he wanted to do was cry and hug his mother, but he knew she felt horrible too. Masaru had lost a brother, yes, but his mother had had to watch the body of his best friend surrounded by blood. His father was there for both of them, however, Masaru didn't want to upset either of them, so he decided not to show sadness in front of his parents. I have to be strong, he told himself. The Bakugo family held a small funeral for Inko and pressured the authorities to find little Izuku. Before long, they became the face of a campaign against police officers and heroes. 3 months after Inko's death, a stranger appeared at Masaru's house and introduced himself as Hisashi Sato. His mother, upon seeing him, said she would kill him and tried to get him to leave. His father had to come between them and demand an explanation. It turned out that the man was the former partner of his friend's mother. He left her when she was pregnant in order to focus on her career. He soon regretted it and wanted to get back in touch with Inko, but she cut off any kind of connection they might have had. Thanks to the campaign they had generated, Hisashi learned of Inko Midoriya's death and also learned that she had a son, Izuku Midoriya. After a long discussion, Hisashi and Masaru's mother came to an agreement. He became an important part of the campaign, beginning to lobby and pressure the authorities. 3 years later, they found a warehouse that they linked to Izuku, but they found it empty. There were clear examples and evidence that showed the existence of a clandestine laboratory. The DNA of one man was found at the scene, Yoko Tanaka, who was prosecuted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The Bakugo and Hisashi were clearly angry about the situation, as the real blame was never found. Little by little, the pressure eased, as did the people who supported them, so they could not do much more. They decided to put a stop to the whole situation, giving him a funeral just as small as his mother's. That day, as they buried an empty coffin that was supposed to be his best friend's, Masaru made a promise to himself. I have to be a better man. He had to be better than Hisashi, who abandoned his family. He had to be a better man than the policeman, who ignored every complaint they had been given. And he had to be a better man than those heroes who swooped like vultures on the case once it became famous. In honor of the brother he had during his early years, he took on that daring personality that characterized him. And his life just went on, never forgetting his brother. He knew he wanted to be a hero, but unlike him, Masaru didn't have a gift as incredible as his, so he decided to become a policeman. Normally they were mocked for picking up after heroes, but Masaru's case was different. Since joining the police force, he performed act after act of bravery, solving high-profile cases and going head-to-head with villains. He has gained some fame, on par with heroes like Sir Night Eye or Death Arms. He soon married an extraordinary woman, Mitsuki, and together they had a son just like them, Katsuki Bakugo. That son became the spitting image of his former best friend, daring and adventurous, with a powerful gift that he had inherited from both him and his wife. Just as had once happened with his best friend, the adults and peers around his son began to praise and exalt him. Little by little, he saw how that boldness turned into ego and arrogance. Was that okay? Was it okay for his son to become an egocentric who thought he was the center of the universe? He always relegated the correction of behavior to his mother because of her explosive nature, but seeing how her son was going down the wrong path, he decided to have a serious talk with him. He told her his entire past, how he had a brother who was kidnapped, and how he was a victim of the authorities' ineffectiveness. Listen, son, he said as he crouched down. I decided to be a better man than those people, and you have to be a better man than me. You were blessed with a powerful gift, that's true, and I know you'll be a strong man, but don't let that get you down. Being strong doesn't mean treating other people like dirt and treating them like extras. Being strong means looking out for other people and becoming the support they need. Strong men take care of themselves, but the strongest protect others. After that talk, he could see a change in his son's attitude, so he felt happy and proud of the words he had said to him. Sure, he never completely stopped being so bold, but he couldn't blame him. He had gotten it from his mother. You could say that Masaru was at the top of his game in life. A beautiful family, a huge house, a job where he was admired. For him, nothing could be better. As if it were a joke, his life took another huge turn. 32 years after his friend disappeared, he found him again. Clearly older, his face scarred, but it was him. She knew it, she knew that this man was her brother. He wasn't a man though, he was now known as a monster. Today the world can sleep more peacefully. For more than 2 decades, this villain has been sought in different countries, and today, with the help of our heroes and the police department, we have managed to catch him. Ladies and gentlemen, the Raven of Death. As if he were an animal in a zoo, flashes and flashes from dozens of cameras began to illuminate his face as he looked straight ahead with a serious look. Masaru's brain kept spinning with the main question in his head: why? Why did it have to be like this? Why had that boy who once wanted to be a hero become this? I'm sorry I didn't save you," was the last thing said by the monster that had taken over his brother's body. The demon. Seeing each other face to face after 30 years was difficult. For both of them, in fact. Masaru wondered what had happened to that smiling boy with a dream of being a hero, while he blamed himself for never saying goodbye to his best friend. Slowly, Masaru sat in the room in front of the transparent cell, attentive to the green-haired man in front of him, tied from head to toe in a straitjacket. Izuku. Masaru. So you don't deny it? What thing? That you are Izuku Midoriya. Does it matter? You know very well who I am. Yes, but I was hoping that it wasn't you, Izuku. She said the last part in an almost inaudible whisper. When I saw you, I recognized you instantly. Why? Why didn't you ever come with me? I could have helped you, rescued you, and no, you shouldn't have become this monster. I can't change the past, Masaru. This is what I've become. It's too late for a change, he said with a sigh. I guess you want to know what happened to me, don't you? I know what happened. Mexico. Brazil? Russia? You don't have to tell me, we all know it, Death Crow. You named me that, I just adopted it. I'm proud of you, Masaru. I'm glad to know that you're a great man. Why are you doing this? Don't you realize the situation? You're the most wanted villain in the world, you might be sentenced to death, and yet you look so calm. I'm already dead. Izuku Midoriya died more than 32 years ago. Masaru, his brother, took it in a figurative way, and not as literal as it had actually happened. Why didn't I go with you? I didn't want to, it's that simple. When I came back from the dead, I had a new purpose: to save any child who has suffered the same fate as me, any child who has been kidnapped, who has lost their family, who is used for experiments. That is my purpose, that is who I am. Save the children? Really? Masaru placed his palm on his forehead, debating between laughing or crying. And what was about Mexico? Over 10,000 people, including children, were found dead. Did you save them? Did you save those children, Izuku? For the first time since she had seen him, Izuku lost his stoic look, replacing it with a look of frustration. Remembering what happened that day was never to his liking. I regret every day what happened, was the only thing he said. I don't deny what happened that day, nor everything I've done during these 25 years. Is that what you want to hear? I did what I did, Masaru. The Death Crow is who I am. You can't complain or wish things were different, it's useless. Is this how this is going to end? Why are you asking me that? I'm just a villain who got caught. You're the cop, right? Could you tell me what you have done these last 30 years? It would be a pleasure, brother. Masaru was in no position to talk to that villain, but the two still had a pleasant and friendly chat. Would a policeman ever be able to have such a friendly chat with a villain? It wasn't possible, but at that moment they were neither policeman nor villain. They were brothers talking after 3 long decades. The cells at Japan's maximum security prison, Tartarus, were extremely oppressive. No matter who entered one of them, they always did so with a blank stare, but for the first time a man walked into one of them with a smile. It wasn't a sadistic or psychopathic smile, but a nostalgic smile of the purest happiness there could be. Even though he knew he would be confined in that cell for the rest of his life and in complete solitude, he didn't stop smiling. He never would. As he entered the darkness of his prison, he settled into a corner and kept his mind busy wandering through his past memories. After a long while, sleep finally overtook him and he closed his eyes to rest. He didn't realize it, but as he closed his eyes, a tear escaped from them. It was the first time I cried in a long time. He had a dream. He was in a distant place, full of green meadows. He was not transformed into the Death Crow, nor was he wearing his suit and jacket. He was wearing simple brown dress pants and a white long-sleeved shirt, standing in the meadow looking at a huge lake in front of him. It was already getting dark, so the lake took on a beautiful golden color, and inside it there were a dozen beautiful women bathing and playing with each other. He knew them all. They were women he loved with all his heart, and who had followed him across the world, despite the danger. Soon, a woman approached him from behind and grabbed his hand. "What are you thinking about, master?" the woman asked. He looked at her straight in her eyes and placed his hand on her cheek. She took it and rubbed her face against his palm, enjoying the touch. "I think that I would like to marry you, make you mine and give each of you a child more than a lustful phrase full of carnal pleasure," she said it with unconditional and pure love. "I want to give you the world," the woman smiled. "Then please do so, master. We would be extremely happy to bear your child and be your wives." Who remained silent. He always wanted to throw it all away, now more than ever. He lived a quiet life, taking care of his children and his wives, but he couldn't. "I can't have children and abandon them. What will happen when they grow up and see their father far away? They will have older brothers to take care of them and loving mothers for them." He shook his head. "It would break my heart not to see them grow up myself." He stroked the woman's hair. "Then don't go. There are already many of your children taking care of countries in the same way as you. Lion, Yuri, and Mateus have even become top heroes. That's why I can't stop now. Someone has to get their hands dirty, take lives to free those who can't defend themselves." He lowered his hand from her head and grabbed hers. "I know, no matter what happens, we will never convince you to stop being him," he said while squeezing her hand. "Would you love me even if I go far away?" The woman smiled. "We love you with all our hearts, master. To us you are no Death Crow, you are our beloved Wilhelm, the one who watches over with Will. Now come, let's enjoy our time together." Master, a wave of little boys and girls rushed towards him, hugging him tightly. "We miss you so much," he smiled. "I missed you little brats too." He began to rub their heads one by one. "How have you been, huh?" "Very bad. We haven't been able to play with you in a long time," said a girl. "Yeah, it's not fair, he leaves too often." "I'm sorry, kids, but you know I have to do this." "Yes, we know," they answered a little sadly. "Come on, don't be sad. How about you show me what you've been up to? Miss Irina told me you've been preparing a surprise." "Oh, that's right, come on, come on." One of the kids grabbed him by the hand and dragged him through the hallways of the place. To say that I was very happy when I went to those meadows was an understatement. I had a huge family there and I would give my life to them. It was selfish to think that way, but he hoped his capture would depress them at least a little, because the truth was that he missed them all madly every second he was away. Now he was locked up, and he would never see his children or his wives again, because he had been clear with them. No matter what happened to him, they were not to intervene. He wanted them to move on with their lives, even if that meant forgetting about him. He opened his eyes in surprise. Never in his entire life had he been so surprised. "Is that Shigaraki?" Things were very confusing for him at that moment. What the hell was going on? And why had that small-time villain he had encountered transformed into this? It was very intimidating. It was like a bucking demon that would touch his soul at any moment. "Rise up, villains," answered the call of the new symbol of evil, and march, march for me, march for destruction and chaos, march for a new world, march. This is our time to change everything. If a man believes, it is not because he is weak, but because he has been strong for a long time. The solitude. Susan Sato was known for two things. The first was for being a delicate and extremely feminine girl. She liked makeup, fashionable clothes, and looking good for others, especially for her boyfriend of 1 year, Katsuki Bakugo, or as she called him, Ka-chan. The second was because of his brutality in combat. His delicate personality took a back seat when he put on his hero suit. A feminine personality combined with enormous strength. That was how she was, and that was why she had chosen her hero name, the Lady of War, Valkyrie. Showing off her beauty and always smiling when she launched herself into battle, enjoying it because, according to her words, combat is an art, and the combatant is the most skilled of artists. She had rarely been seen serious or even angry, but right now she is not smiling, angry, or serious. She was crying inconsolably on the floor, after having woken up after a long war in Kamino and arguing with the bearers of One for All. A news had shaken her entire world. Her father, the one who adopted her and cared for her, had died as a result of gigantomachia. She had never felt so alone in this world, even in the orphanage when they told her she was useless, or when she couldn't control One for All when her master, All Might, died facing All for One. The world was falling apart, heroes, police and civilians dead, villains free led by demons, but right now he didn't give a damn. She didn't care that her teacher died, she didn't care that Shigaraki escaped, she didn't care if the world fell apart. How could he care about that? It was his world that mattered, his. There was no one for her right now, just one person. A person who had rarely visited her. The solitude. Katsuki Bakugo had just woken up from a 2-day coma. He was surprised to see a man he recognized. His father had told him dozens of stories about him. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked as best he could. "Shigaraki attacked Tartarus and escaped. I heard about your father." "How old news? It was more than 10 months ago." "I've been locked in a cell for 3 years, brat. Don't be condescending. It hurts me to know that I couldn't be at his funeral." "Buck off with your bucking kindness. You're a bucking murderer. I don't need words of encouragement." "He was very proud of you." "How the buck did you know where I was?" "Death knows many things." "TSK, don't use those bucking convoluted phrases with me. I guess you're more like your mother." "Don't mention the damn thing." Suddenly he felt the blow of a water bottle on his forehead. "Hey, what the hell is wrong with you, bird? Don't talk about your mother like that, brat." "TSK, I do whatever the buck I want. Why should I respect that hitch? When my father died, all the old lady did was get drunk." "She's still your mother." "Bullshit, she stopped being my mother a long time ago. I take care of myself." "Your father wouldn't want you to call him that. From now on you must speak of your mother with respect. You will call her mother or by her name." "TSK, are you done with your talk? So you can finally get out of here." "No, I'm not done yet." He had kept one of his arms behind his back and was now slowly extending it. Katsuki thought the worst, but ended up very confused when he saw that he was carrying a 1-liter can of Oreo cookie snow. "Your father and I ate this ice cream whenever we could, so I brought you some. I hope you like it," she said while handing him a spoon. Hey, he couldn't help but let out a very small smile. "You're just like the old man." He took another hit with the bottle. "Hey! Don't talk about Masaru like that, brat. Are you going to give me ice cream or not?" "Here." She grabbed the spoon with some effort as he opened the jar and placed it between her legs. He had never liked that taste. In general, he didn't like anything that was sweet, but he still enjoyed the ice cream they brought him. It reminded him of his old man. "Do you like it?" "No, but it was his favorite flavor, so I guess it's not so bad." The man sighed. "I will now collaborate with the heroes to return Japan to normal, so maybe I will see you again. If you need anything you can count on me, brat. Good luck." And he disappeared in a second, leaving a red-eyed crow. Bakugo continued eating his ice cream with a lost look, remembering his old man. Little by little her expressionlessness turned into sobs. His father had always told him to be strong, always supported him, and always taught him what he knew. He never expressed his affection to her in the same way, but he knew she loved him? Right. He knew what she meant to him. Since his death, he had been in a very dark place where the only light was his girlfriend, but after 10 months of darkness he felt like he was feeling a light like his father again. It was strange, his father had always told him that he looked like that big bird, but to him, the two of them were the same as each other. And even though he wasn't her father, right now she felt like she was back with him. "Are you woke up? Are you crying?" Bucking Mineta. "Shut up, where am I?" she screamed while wiping away her tears. What a relief, he's already mad, he's still the same weird guy bucking serious. Don't use your standards to evaluate me. This version of Masaru is based on my father and what he taught me. Be a real man who stands up to protect his family and works for them. I love you so much, old man.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.